Couples therapists. What are some relationships that instantly set off red flags? A friend from HS's parents went to counseling. The therapist probably realized it wasn't going to work when she started fucking the husband. Edit, to whoever gave this a wholesome award. Thank you. Needed the laugh. One of the big red flags I look for is meta conversation. Example to use for sake of discussion: partner 1 is mad THQT, partner 2 doesn't help out at home more. There are always two levels of communication. One is the direct message intended, please clean up the dishes, and the second is communication about the communication, I expect you to do what I ask. When communication about the communication turns meta, the message gets muddled and a power struggle erupts from misunderstandings. Tone, body language, and the way one responds to the request all become the focal point. If the arguments don't fall into meta arguments, then that's a sign the couple has a strong foundation. And the work is usually about exploring expectations of the relationship or readjusting roles. If they fall into meta arguments, it's a sign the couple needs to build up their foundation, which will likely lead to them able to adjust the roles themselves once that happens. Two different approaches. Same base issue at hand. My mom is a couples therapist and she says there are some people that she has told you're not going to work out on the first couple sessions. I was in couples therapy. At the end of the first session, the therapist asked us to say one nice thing about each other. I went first. Said something nice about him. Therapist asked him to say something. And he replied, my mother always told me if you can't say something nice, say nothing. So I'll say nothing. Felt so sorry for the therapist. And yes, that's when I started planning my exit. I am now very happy in a new relationship and my revenge is to be living my beat life. Very happy now, smiley face. I am a therapist. Newer to couples counseling. But one of the flags I've seen is one person digging their heels in and not accepting any feedback or suggestions. Then that person tells me and partner that they are trying. I called him out on it. Said that he needed to evaluate what he's willing to do and not do. Needless to say, didn't hear back from them. Another weird one is separating without a plan. All that's gonna do is teach you how to live without each other. I would ask them, okay, how do you know when the separation works? I don't know. When I start missing them, I guess, is what I typically hear. I don't focus on couples counseling, but I do have some couples therapy session from time to time. If you are in a relationship, some advice that will help you out. You will typically find yourselves in 3 metaphorical positions. 1. Face to face. When you are here, you are feeding into each other, building each other up and communicating. 2. Side by side. This is when you both are working together on a problem to find a solution. It's not forcing one to do all the work, but you both are taking responsibility. 3. Back to back. This is the position you never want to be in because you take your focus off each other and you go your own directions. You either end up with one person pulling the other or a gap is formed. This position also says, I don't care about your input. If I get a couple in position 3 and they refuse to move to position 2 or 1, that is a pretty big indicator the relationship will fail. All of these signs were clearly exhibited by my ex-wife on a constant basis. All my friends, co-workers and my parents could see it. But I just couldn't. Not for a long time. She had many clear boundaries that absolutely could not be crossed. But couldn't and wouldn't respect any of my boundaries or any of my hobbies. She would tell me I was useless, lazy, and couldn't do anything right. She would figure out how to make anything and everything my fault. She didn't care how I felt or how her actions affected me. She had no self-awareness whatsoever. Every time I get a new friend, they stop talking to me after a few months. It has to be the dozens of people that are wrong and not me. She would leave shit out to be cleaned or stuff to do around the house to see if I would do it. If I did it, I'd hear nothing. If I didn't, she'd make sure to point out she wanted to see if I'd do it. She hated my parents for no reason. Literally because in-laws bad stereotype. Hated them before she even met them. She brainwashed me into not liking them. That's years of having a bad relationship with my parents that I'll never get back. Bragged to people about how she was breaking me down in order to build me up and mold me into the perfect husband for her. It's the wife's job. Teehee. Oh, and she reminded me at least once a week about the time I brought home Subway after work when I was 18 and had graduated high school 3 months prior because I didn't bring any home for her or her kids. Imagine being 26 and your wife is reminding you of something you did 8 years ago that upset her. The craziest part is I put up with all of that until I found out she was cheating on me. I'm not a therapist. But my therapist's straight face told me that there are worse options than divorce. Got divorced and it was the best thing that happened to me. Being unable or unwilling to compromise or concede points for the betterment of the relationship. For example, at some point in a long-standing argument where neither party is willing to concede, a compromise is needed. When it's the same person in the relationship always hell-bent on being right all the time, that's a red flag. Most couples understand the importance of compromise. So if there is a partner who only thinks about themselves and how important it is for them to be right, that's a major issue. That either means that the person isn't thinking about how this is also an important point for the other partner, or even worse, doesn't care. Being obsessed with being in the right and only being in the right vs listening to your partner's needs breeds frustration and a relationship power differential where one partner is just catering to the other. Both therapists, my husband, ex, and I went to were so fooled by his lies that they focused on my attitudes as the problem. The guy was an abuser, a sexual pervert, and a child molester. He molested our daughter. But he was a very good liar as well. Therapists cannot always tell what's going on. I've seen individuals but did coursework in couples therapy. It's always a dooming sign when one of the patients doesn't want to be there and is unwilling to try. Those never end well. Constant, needless escalation. When I don't think we need this expensive thing is escalated to you don't really love me, major problem. It shows up quickly in therapy if you're watching for it. Mostly because the one using this to avoid accountability is almost guaranteed to play this card in relation to therapy itself. Either I had to drag them here or they're just trying to break up with me. What they're doing is avoiding conversation about the issue by blowing it up into a bigger problem than it is, so they can make the other person respond to their feelings rather than dealing with their concerns. Obligatory, not a therapist but my own experience in therapy. My wife and I, separated now, went to couples counseling where it was a husband-wife counseling team. I thought that would be great, since it may help us open up more having a member of both sexes there. My wife was hesitant about couples counseling, but agreed to try it. We had our initial session together and it was cold and difficult, as expected. And my wife said she still wanted to leave. But they convinced her to try a few more sessions to see if anything clicked as we opened up. We had an individual session the next time, and I thought it went fantastically. I gained a completely different understanding of intimacy, not sexual but emotional and relational, and I was jazzed to start working at putting it into practice. My wife came out with tear stains and sat in her car crying before she finally left for home. We drove separately because she was coming from work and I from home. Our next appointment was another individual session. The male counselor and I were talking again, and he started digging into my expectations and desires in the relationship, what I loved about wife, etc. He point blank asked me, do you feel wife is a good match for you in life, and that you want to continue this relationship? And I was a little off put, but figured it's probably a good thing to establish that right off the bat. So I answered emphatically yes. And he just looked heartbroken and so very sad. I knew pretty well right then that we were toast. Wife admitted her affair the day before our next session and left. When my ex-wife and I went to counseling, he did this on our third session. He met with her first. When he was meeting with me, all he had to say was, you need to get a lawyer immediately. Boundary violations. Testing boundaries a little bit is okay, but repeatedly violating boundaries is a big red flag. I work a lot with people who have left abusive relationships and often they doubt they ever will date again and eventually want to. We work on their personal boundaries, but I also suggest some easy boundaries to have and how they can help. Boundary 1, maintain your routine. If you go to bed at 9 p.m. and wake up to work out at 5 a.m., maintain that. A decent person will respect that. A non-decent person will try to bulldoze through it. It might look like, "Oh, stay up talking with me. I'm lonely." It's romantic to talk all night. If you aren't a teen, it isn't cute. It actually makes you too tired to be present and critically reflective of the relationship. If they are teasing and making fun of your routine, you probably don't have the same values. It isn't about who is right or wrong. You probably aren't on the same page. Boundary 2, cultural trend here is to move in together within a month, so might not apply elsewhere so much, for almost 6 months. Don't get together more than 3-4 times a week. This boundary helps you to preserve your UNES. It gives you time for your interests and friends. It very quickly flushes out insecurities or controlling behavior in a potential partner. Other good ones to pay attention to are cute things that violate a boundary. Hey, I have my kids this weekend, so no in-person time, and I will only spend time on my phone after the kids go to bed at 8, and guess what? The person cutely surprises you with a coffee. I'd give this one a one-time pass. Thanks for the coffee. Sorry I can't have you in. I'm not ready for you to meet the kids. Etc. The person's response to being called out tells you so much. Folks, knowing your boundaries, knowing how to set them and knowing how to maintain them are so very important to your own personal well-being. Also learn how to respect other people's boundaries. Boundaries don't have to be permanent. They can change. But they can change because someone has earned it or lost it. Edit, to add the word months after 6 in boundary 2. Thanks for watching.